plenty of bonus points with everybody for giving such a revealing and detailed answer to what happened to one of your key players on Sunday by just saying he got hurt playing football. So I would love to be able to tell you from being out at TCO Performance Center now why Mike Hughes is not playing, but I cannot do so because Mike Zimmer would not say. But now the Vikings are without Mike Hughes. The Vikings are without Mackenzie Alexander as they go up against the NFL's number one wide receiver. Matthew Coller, Judd Zulgad in for the first 30 minutes. Myron Metcalf's going to come by. We'll have Robert Mays, and also Sam Monson will be on the show today. So a big show as we get you ready for the Saints and Vikings. And Judd, all week long, you and I have been saying, hey, we think this can be close. We think this could be a good battle. And one of the little side notes was because they're healthy, that helps a lot. New Orleans is missing a couple of players on their defensive line, so that hurts them. But to have two cornerbacks be out for this game, leaving you with Trey Wayans and Xavier Rhodes to play the entire game, and presumably Jaron Kearse to be your nickel cornerback, unless you find somebody else. They did bring back Marcus Sherrills today. That's a problem. I mean, that is a big problem. We loved the cornerback rotation. Hughes had been emerging and playing better since that Dallas game and looking like he's a pretty solid player. And he had played better than Xavier Rhodes for this entire season when he's been in. And now this entire defense rests on Rhodes because you cannot pressure Drew Brees. It does not happen. You don't get after Drew Brees. It's not like, oh yeah, well, we'll just hit him. You don't. He gets rid of the ball faster than anyone else in the NFL. So now this is a problem for the Vikings.
Yeah, and I'm the guy that told you on Tuesday that I had come around to think to myself, Judd, this notion that they're going to get blown out by the Saints is probably folly, because in football, if you think one thing is going to happen, the opposite happens. And then I saw this news and I don't see how it's workable. I mean, I don't know. Kearse in the big nickel, when he was forced to play a lot in the second half, I believe against the Broncos, did a really nice job. But this is the Saints. And I don't know if you can play that package exclusively as your nickel package, if you have to move Waynes inside and Holton Hill outside. Going in, I kept saying Kamara, Cook at tight end, and Thomas. How do you stop them, right? But now, I thought that was tough when we were talking about the Vikings being at full strength. Now I really have no idea. Like, are you telling me that you think that there's even a remote possibility that Kearse can play consistently there and hold up for the course of an entire football game? And here's the other factor. There was enough pressure on Cousins and the offense going in, right? Just to produce. But realistically, if you're the Vikings now, you got to look at Cousins and the boys and say, we need 40 from you probably. Like, the pressure's that high. So I would love to go back to the way I was on Ventline and be somewhat optimistic. But with this news, with two guys out, I don't see how I can. It just doesn't feel, it feels folly to me to say that they have a decent chance to win when I'm thinking to myself, okay, Rhodes, Waynes, and Kearse, and or Rhodes, Waynes, and Holton Hill.
Yeah, and the slot corner is a different deal.
Yes.
It's not the same as playing outside corner. It's an entirely different position. Xavier Rhodes, when he was shadowing receivers, which I fully expect him to be shadowing Michael Thomas now with this, because if Michael Thomas goes in the slot against Jaron Kearse, or he goes in the slot against whoever the heck else they're going to have as a corner, then you're just going to get slaughtered. So you're going to have Xavier Rhodes follow around Michael Thomas for the entire game, which I'm not sure is a very good matchup at this point, unless, like you said, the referees are really dedicated to not calling penalties. But Thomas is at the peak of his game. He's one of the best receivers of all time to start his career. And even though Xavier Rhodes had a good time against him in the NFC Championship game, eventually Thomas still got Rhodes in the end of that game. So you're talking about a really steep battle there. And this is a team, too, that abuses the middle of the field. I mean, they use Jared Cook a ton, their tight end. They use Alvin Kamara all the time. And Eric Kendricks is going to play, but he's coming off the injury. And now you have essentially a noob playing your slot corner. I think J-Ron Curse knows the assignments there.
Sure.
And he did play really well in one game that he had to be a slot corner against Green Bay. But this is a different type of battle here than what Green Bay was bringing to the table, or Denver was bringing to the table.
He came in
played safety in that game.
Yeah, but it was the Broncos game too. Okay, so explain this to me as a guy who's out there, because I'm sorry, but this also comes to a point now where we're not going to be told what happened, but there has to be accountability here. As you guys discussed, and I saw Chad Graff tweeted this a short while ago, they didn't play anybody against the Bears who they cared about. They basically didn't. Alexander, who was on the injury report all of the week of the Bears game, basically played that entire game. And now he's too hurt to play in this game where he's absolutely key. How did we get here? Like, what's the excuse for, well, he was on we held everybody else out, but we didn't hold this one guy who was hurt out, who, by the way, is a very key player, and I think has had a very nice year, unless I'm wrong. Like, how did we get here? It's frustrating.
So if Alexander was just the first questionable player that played and got hurt, I would say, well, this is just a random bad luck thing. Somebody had to go out there in week 17 and play slot corner. But even just this year, they put out Adam Thielen before he was ready. He gets hurt. Last year, they tried to do the pitch count thing with Delvin Cook. He gets hurt. And now you go into a week 17 where you need nobody. You play all of your backups except one guy gets to start. And they could have just played the base package all game long if the score didn't matter. Of course, it didn't. They're playing no starters and starting Sean Mannion and running every play. And yet this one guy has to go out there and play. Now, with Mike Hughes, I understood it with Hughes because you were sort of out of corners at that point. But there was another option for the nickel corner where you could just go 1994 football and play an extra linebacker there and play Wilson and Cameron Smith and, I don't know, I'm blanking on somebody, Kentrell Brothers. You could have had those three guys play and treat it like a preseason game and be fine. Alexander plays way too many snaps to be a guy that you run out there and risk. And the fact that he was on the injury report already makes you questionable. If he wasn't, I would say, well, these random injuries, who knows?
Yes,
but he already had a knee injury going into that game.
Right.
And this is a guy who has developed into actually a pretty darn good slot corner, which is not a job you just hand off to somebody. It isn't, hey, just go run up and down the sideline with that wide receiver. You'll be fine. This is a complicated position that took Alexander several years to be able to get down, to know his assignments, to know the zones, the run fits, all those things. And one thing we haven't talked about at all, because we've just said breeze, is that the Saints have two good running backs. I mean, if your run fits are off because your slot corner is a guy who doesn't know the job or is not as fit for the job as Alexander is, you're going to have some problems. He was on the field for 562 snaps this year, looking game by game, about 40 to 50 a game. I mean, that's 80% of the game.
He's a starter.
He's on the field.
Without a doubt.
And now he's out. And the fact that Hughes was his backup, and you would trust Hughes in the slot because when he first came in as a rookie, that was the position he learned. He was rotating all of camp his first year as a rookie. And then I talked to Hughes just last week about learning both positions and what it's meant to his knowledge of the game. And then he's mysteriously out too with a neck injury, and he played that game as well in week 17. Now you're looking at being in a very, very difficult position to try and stop one of the league's best passing games. And Drew Brees, who comes in his last 4 games, has a 137 quarterback rating.
It's damn near impossible, right? Am I missing?
If this was at US Bank Stadium, I would say nothing is impossible at US Bank Stadium.
Okay.
Not being at US Bank Stadium, wow.
I don't see how you do this.
The only way I would look at it is just a little bit through the lens of Las Vegas. I mean, I don't talk about gambling a lot, but I remember somebody writing about this, how one player or even 2 players at any position except for quarterback are not going to move the needle on what Vegas thinks of a game. So a lot of times we overstate what some injuries mean. But in this case, I don't think we are. If it was just Alexander, I would say, well, you're in tough now because it's going to be hard to rotate those corners.
Right.
And that was the solution.
Right.
That was the antidote to Xavier Rhodes and his issues with injuries that have slowed him down for this year and a big chunk of last year was, hey, but if you can only play him 45 or 50 snaps and Rhodes can come out and in and Hughes can help him out, well, then you'll be okay. But now you lost the guy that was supposed to be the guy helping your guy.
And now you're down to Holton Hill.
It's a really tough spot.
Who you don't trust.
I think that Holton Hill is a good player and would be fine, but he's not. He doesn't play this position.
Yeah.
He's not really relevant to the cornerback conversation because he can't play inside.
The coach doesn't really like to play him. I just don't understand the fact that you played Alexander, who by the way, has been so solid to me that we have not talked about him much.
No, not at all.
But that's a credit to him because we've talked about Wayne's fall off and Rhodes going off the cliff.
He's been solid.
We haven't talked about this guy who as a pick for a couple of years was a definite disappointed the entire franchise. Learned this spot, which to your point is a hybrid spot. You don't just take some guy and say, okay, you go do this now. And while you're sitting everybody else against the Bears, you basically say, you're fine. You could have signed Marcus Sherrills last week, put him on your active roster and said, Marcus, go play the slot corner. If you get beat, we don't care.
Yeah.
They signed him today. Like that was the answer. This is not hard. And instead what you've done, and the one thing where if we go back to what you brought up about Vegas and the gambling line comes into play is the quarterback does make the difference. And now you're talking about Drew Brees going against a Viking cornerback rotation or cornerbacks that has gone from what we consider probably to be shaky, but okay, here's what you do to succeed potentially to, oh no, you're really screwed.
I want to show you my computer, what I'm looking at right now. I'm just going to point to it right there. That is where Mackenzie Alexander ranks as a tackler in the NFL.
Wow.
That is the fourth best by Pro Football Focus as a tackler.
Yeah.
So talking about the run game and how well he's fit in, and that's something they loved about him coming out of the draft was his toughness, his tackling ability is not a big guy. All of a sudden, the outside runs is that going to be a problem with Alvin Kamara because you're trying to fill in somebody else? And now if you're going to ask Jaron Kearse to play an entire game at nickel corner, Jaron Kearse is a good tackler, and he's a talented player that I've liked really since his rookie year in terms of his physical skills. Mm-hmm. And at times it's come to fruition this year, the Denver game being the most notable of those times where he slowed down Noah Fant on that last drive, made a couple of key plays. But you're talking about a guy who has only played a handful of snaps all season. At the slot corner, he did in week 1 and 2 play 36 and 29 snaps in week 1 and 2.
Yep.
And their defense was really good in week 1 and not great in week 2. They gave up 21 points right off the bat, and then the Packers got extremely conservative. But since then, 1 week, week 6, he had 16 snaps in the slot and basically nothing since. It's been a very long time since he had to fill in.
And what's the Michael
spot.
Thomas plan now?
I think it's always been that Rhodes is going to track him. Woo-hoo. But I mean, having a guy like Jaron Kearse is important, but it's the slot corner not having the quickness and the tackling ability of Alexander, but then it's also the rotation. It really hits you on those two different fronts,
right?
Because not being able to work in Mike Hughes over what are you going to take, like 65 snaps or something like that in a game, and he could have taken a good 25 out of Rhodes' hands if he wanted to. I mean, just looking at since the cornerback rotation started, 28 snaps, 39 snaps, and 46 snaps for Mike Hughes. So he's playing a lot. And he was filling in for Waynes at times too. And Trey Waynes has not been good this year. They both have not been good. Huge blow.
What's the tension like right now?
Unreal. I mean, Mike Zimmer would not answer any questions today, even about Eric Kendricks. He had to be dragged to ask about Kendricks making All-Pro, which LOL Pro Bowl. I mean, really?
Yeah. And you knew that was going to happen. But it's off the charts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have the owner yesterday's practice walking around the practice field, just talking to players and warm-ups and everything else, really making his presence known. I thought that was notable. I've never seen that before. I don't know if you did when you were covering the team, if you saw owners walking out on the practice field. Extremely rare. And I thought, and Ziggy was even standing around for press conferences. And I was like, wow, this is something I have not seen.
Yeah, that's observational.
I wonder
on
if
his part.
He's just making everybody know that he's watching. And my understanding from this week of practice is that they've been really pushing extremely hard, which I'm not sure is always the right way to go about it.
Could get a guy hurt.
Which might have happened if only Mike Zimmer would tell us the truth about that, but I guess he's not going to. So the tension, I mean, you turn on the TV right now, go to ESPN.com, look on anywhere, and you're going to see Mike Zimmer being talked about to Dallas, which I've heard through people is definitely a real thing. And I tweeted that last night. What do you have?
Like
something?
this?
I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens with Mike Zimmer, the Vikings head coach. And I do not think necessarily that it would be a situation where the Vikings would want to move on. But Mike Zimmer is a coach that Jerry Jones thinks very highly of. And we've seen in the past teams be able to work out deals where maybe you go ahead and make a trade a pick, get the coach out of his contract. So I would look out for that if the Vikings were to lose to the Saints on Sunday, which I think a lot of people expect.
And everybody knows it. Everybody there knows it. If I'm guessing that if you're in that front office right now, you're calling your friends in the league and you're saying, "So what do you guys got going on?" and things like that. You know, I mean, if you're in any position that could go, if you're George Edwards, you're probably like, "Man, if we give up 42, I know I'm toast." Mm-hmm. And other people on that staff, everybody's thinking the same thing. And here's the crazy deal about this. Mm-hmm. There's only one guy, and it's not Dalvin Cook. There is one guy who looked very tense the other day, by the way. One guy who can change all of this, and one guy who can keep everybody in their place, and that is Kirk Cousins. He could keep himself in his place by having a great performance. They will not win by just handing the ball off and beating the New Orleans Saints. It's not going to happen.
Correct.
Check downs to Dalvin Cook are wonderful, and I love them, but you don't win a football game by checking down to your running back a bunch of times. You're going to win a football game by your quarterback going to New Orleans against a defense that's just okay. It's not great. It's just okay. And playing the game of your life in New Orleans, which Kirk actually did in 2017, played extremely, extremely well at the Dome. Not the same as the playoffs, but still played really well against New Orleans at the Dome. That's it, because if he doesn't play well, I am now feeling, I started the week like, I don't know about all this. By now, I'm feeling like, yeah, this is about to blow up.
But that dials up the pressure because internally there have to be a lot of people with that team that know it's a long shot. Like there's not enough from Kirk's past to say Kirk's got it. Like there might be some guys where you'd say, we are in a bind, but guess what? We've got so-and-so at quarterback, right? We got Tom Brady or we got Breeze, or go down a list of QBs who you've trusted and think to yourself, he gives us a shot. If you're Stephon Diggs, Thielen, Rudolph, Zimmer, Mackenzie, Alexander, you ain't going to play, but you're going to watch the game. You know, who on earth is thinking, well, you know what? We got Kirk.
Oh, everybody's thinking the same exact thing.
But that's what I'm saying. That makes that pressure that much worse because until Kirk proves them all wrong, they're walking into a trap.
And I've been looking at how New Orleans' defense performed against different offenses. There is one reason a few weeks ago to feel pretty good when the San Francisco 49ers put 48 on them at the Dome, which is really, really impressive. Mm-hmm. But they played a similar sort of play action rollout offense in Tennessee, and they sacked the heck out of Ryan Tannehill. And Tannehill, I thought in that game played actually really well and still lost by 10 to the New Orleans Saints. And you know, they've played some other teams with good offenses that have done really nothing to them. Dallas scored 10 against them at their place in a win for New Orleans when Teddy Bridgewater was starting. The Rams scored the Rams actually scored 27 against them. So that was actually a good game for the Rams. But there are not as many reasons for sure to think that there's the path to victory, as we were talking about yesterday, as there would have been in just because of these two players going out. And then you mentioned the tension. Everybody's thinking the same thing, that if Kirk Cousins comes out and looks really good right away and leads a touchdown drive, you've got a chance. You're in. All right, this could be a ball game and everybody could settle down and stop thinking about their futures for a minute. But the second it goes wrong, and everybody knows this, the second it goes wrong, they do not have the leader under center to go over and get everybody back on the same page and get everybody going and everything like that we see from the great quarterbacks. The great quarterbacks can play horribly for the whole game and be losing and throw 3 picks and be like, let's go win this game and still have a shot to do it. That is not your quarterback. What did Russell Wilson the other day throw for like 40 yards in the first half? He looked awful. Looked like they're going to have no chance.
49ers, yes.
And then he's 6 inches from, winning that game against the 49ers. Well, that is not the quarterback you have. So I think it really depends on how this game starts, and can Kirk Cousins calm everybody down, including Zimmer? Because if not, then we're going to see what we saw last year in like week 17, or what we saw last year in Seattle, or a number of games. I mean, Kansas City, where it's not just Kirk, but it's other people too responding to the quarterback and responding to the amount of anxiety and pressure that is on this team.
And
right
that
now.
faith can't be there. It can't be. And the problem too is we talked about all week long. Okay, if Kirk can play well, he plays well. Defensively, the game plan is just outstanding. Vikings perspective, they hold them to 20, right? Let's say they hold them to 20. Vikings score 27, get a big win, and we all say that is a great game plan. That was awesome. But now you are literally sitting down with Cousins and the offense and saying, as I said before, we need you to score 44 points. Like you can't think that the defense the Vikings are going to put on the field on Sunday can stop the Saints consistently. You just can't. I don't care if it's Zim as your head coach, Parcells, Lombardi. I don't care. When you're starting a secondary and corners that are this depleted and questionable against these guys, and Drew Brees and Kendricks is playing, but probably gimpy or not, certainly not 100% or close. You have to rely on your offense to come up huge. And there's nothing from that offense that tells me, well, the old Kirk, we might need to win some games 52-50. Okay, good luck against the Saints.
This is your chance,
in
my
a
friend.
playoff game, dude.
So here's the issue with this defense, is that their overall numbers are decent. And I've brought it up all week. They're 5th in total defense.
Yes.
It's pretty hard to say that you had a horrible defense when you're 5th in points, which there's a lot of other stats. That's kind of the most important one, is how many points you allow to go up on the board. However, when you look at when this Vikings defense played good quarterbacks, we agree Carson Wentz is a good quarterback, right?
Yes.
400 total yards. We agree Matt Stafford's a good quarterback. 433 yards.
Yep.
We agree that Dak Prescott is good. 443 yards. We agree Russell Wilson is good. 444. And then even Aaron Rodgers, even though they struggled at times, that Green Bay offense, 383 yards. In all games that were fairly close and competitive, that wouldn't be thrown off by the score of the game or something.
Sure.
That does not give you a ton of confidence for what can happen here, especially without 2 players who I consider both to be quite good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing to me. You can't. Xavier Rhodes shadowing Thomas the entire game in 2020 positively, if I'm a Vikings fan, scares me.
It should.
17? Hey, bring it on. It's going to be great. 2020, no way.
Myron's coming on next. I know what you think of the game, and I know that you've adjusted it within the last couple hours because of this.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, though. What if they do win? How awkward is all of this? It's all going to feel so strange, because we just spent the whole week talking about firing everybody. And everybody at that building knows that everyone talked all week about where Zimmer's going to end up and whether they're signing Cousins and all that stuff, and how Cousins can't win. I think if they win, they're all going to look around and go, well, now what do we do?
Yeah, starting with the coach, possibly. I'm really curious to know more about the tension and what's going on between the Wilfs and Zimmer and Spielman too. There's a lot of fire here right now, and that's what I'm curious about. And is this just it's been 6 years and we're all tired of each other? Is this something happened that we don't know about? Is this the Packer loss infuriated the Wilfs?
I think that's
there's a lot more going on here than we know.
But this has been hanging around since last year. I think the Wilfs heavily considered pushing Zimmer out after last year, after they missed the playoffs and the debacle with DeFilippo. I think that they strongly considered that, because the tension in the building was extremely, extremely high. Even at the beginning of this year when they hired Kevin Stefanski, I remember writing about it for our website. Like this disaster of a introductory press conference where Mike Zimmer at the end was yelling about reporters getting it wrong and things like that as he walked out. Like, whoa, there's a celebration of hiring your guy, right? I mean, it's just all year long. And I've heard this from someone recently that even when they were winning, it was bubbling right underneath the surface, the tension between the players and Zimmer, between Zimmer and Spielman and ownership. And of course, it all surrounds the quarterback, who's the only guy who can bail them out.
If the Wilfs are talking to players, that probably means players have approached them, though, to express their dismay about things.
I get the sense that the players and Zimmer have reached the point where they've been around each other for too long.
That's possible, too.
That's the way that, just
happens.
from talking to a couple people, that's kind of how I would phrase it, because he's still a really good coach, but I just get that feeling.
The Steelers are not